Hello and welcome back to Marineford TCG. My name is Joe. Drink of the day is a cold pint of water, and today Bandai has finally revealed what the Bonney strategy is supposed to be, what they were intending at least. And in this video I'm going to be talking about the two new cards that reveal for Bonney, as well as what I perceive the strategy to be, and some issues it may already have, and also a Koby card. Because why not? Koby's the new Vegapunk for real. He gets support in every set. It's crazy. Anyway, firstly, the alt art has been revealed for the Bonney leader. This is a banger alt art. This is such a nice art. Kuma in the background, little child Bonney doing the Nika dance. I really love this. This is the pack art, I believe, for the Japanese release. But we're never getting the pack art because we're not getting this as packs, right? We're just getting it split between the two sets. And in case you've forgotten, these red and yellow cards and the black cards will be coming out in our OP15 set, which releases in April. So right around rotation, which will make this deck, because this is coming out quite soon in Japan, which will make it quite different, I think, in Japan and in the West, because it's going to be facing different metas with different sets legal. And also rotation will have happened. So it's going to be really hard to properly assess these cards, but I'm going to do my best. And firstly, Roronoa Zoro. This card's bonkers. 7/9 Egghead Straw Hat. On play, one of your leader gets 2,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. Welcome back, Red Whitebeard. I sure am glad we rotated it. So this guy costs 2 less, has 1k less power. But the fact this comes down like a whole cycle earlier than Whitebeard is crazy. This is also not leader locked. You can play this in anything, and I'm going to discuss on the next slide a couple other leaders that I think this could be pretty strong in. It also has an activate main. If your opponent has a character with 8,000 power or more, he gets character rush. Now, this effect is probably not going to be online if you play this on 7 very much, because there's not too many 6/8s that people are playing in the game. If you play him, maybe you play him on 8 or on 9, this will become live much more. So I think what this reads to me is on curve, you just get the power, but if you were to play this later, you get 2 effects. Kind of like the Jinbei. The 8-cost Jinbei that you play in Jinbei. If you play him on curve, you just get the rush guy. But then if you play him like a cycle later, you get to draw 2 and you get a bounce. I'd say that's more of an upgrade, but this is like a little bit of sugar that if you don't see this on curve and you see it after, then you still get like an extra effect, which is pretty nice. Obviously, in the Bonney deck, if you're at 1 life, this is going to make you be at 9k in your opponent's turn, potentially as soon as you're 7 on turn, which is just going to be pretty much completely uninteractable. Like, I guess Ace, if they played Jozu on 6, and then they play I Am Whitebeard into Whitebeard, they can swing 9k with the Jozu and 10k with the leader if they take a life. But then they've got to take a life, which they're not always going to be ecstatic to, and even then they're only getting 2 cards, which is really not that bad. This is going to make this deck like... And the spoiler alert, the other card buffs your leader by 2,000 power as well. So this Bonney deck is just going to be like an aggro crusher. All those decks that are like going 5, 5, 5, 5, think like a Jinbei, maybe even like Rayleigh in the past. I know he doesn't have to just do 5, but he likes to swing wide for low numbers. Nice swings, bro. I'm at 9k on turn 4. What a joke. Yeah, I do broadly think this is just better than Whitebeard. And here's some other decks that you could maybe try out in. Red Purple Luffy is the one that jumps to my mind first. This being searchable off all your Straw Hat Crew searches is brilliant. And you've got a really nice curve on evens where you go like Bonclay on 4, play this Zoro on 7, you become 8k as your opponent goes into their 7 on turn, which is going to be very hard for them to really do anything to you. So you're getting a lot of card advantage in that way by just not having to counter hits. And then that leads nicely into the following turn. You'll be on 9. You can use your leader effect around to 10. Maybe you'll play a 10-cost Shanks. Maybe you'll play a 9-cost Luffy. I don't know. There's all sorts of things you could do on that turn. Maybe even just play a Whitebeard if you're in Japan before rotation. But we can still have Roger, right? 8-cost Roger. So I think this Zoro is going to fit in very, very nicely to the Red Purple Luffy deck. Sort of shore up your mid-game. Also in Roger... This is a replacement for Whitebeard once that rotates. And also broadly, I think this is broadly better than Whitebeard. You do have the cool interaction where you can use Divine Departure and then use Newgates when attacking to get some powerful KOs. But this coming down a cycle earlier, like you could play this on 8 if you go first and only get a single ramp. Or you can play this later on, just on a random 10-Don turn. Get the character rush, which is pretty cool. Oh, we've skipped a page. Get the character rush, get some value out of that. And then you've got 3 Don left for either counter events, maybe a 2-cost Uta, if you've already got an 8-cost Roger on the board. That could be something nice to do. Or even just put more Dons on your leader. The world's your oyster. I think this card is going to be very good. Although he is another unsearchable card for Roger, so sad. Another nod, you could play this in Ace. I think on your odd curve in Ace, this is just going to be one of the best things you can be doing on 7. Especially, imagine into a deck like Mihawk, right? Where say they take evens off you, they play the 5-cost Ashigi on their 6-Don turn. We can't Jozu that because it's immune. But it may well be at 8k power if they choose to use her activate main effect. In which case, your Zoro will get when attacking, and maybe you can attack something. Probably not, but regardless, it'll boost your leader to 8k, buying you a bunch of cards as you go into the next turn. And then you can follow it up on 9 with Iron Whitebeard into Whitebeard. And you know how the game goes from there. This seems like a nice sort of stepping stone, specifically on 7. But even potentially on 8 if that Whitebeard event does get banned, which, personally, I would love to see that card go. I think that card is awful for the game. It's a purple card in blue. Although, but yeah, this card seems crazy in that deck. 3 less confident inclusions. Red, Green, Luffy. It's Straw Hat searchable. You can defend it with your leader effect. This is never getting removed, like in battle. Not at 9k. Buffing your leader to 7k if you've managed to stack on-board effects that would restand Don. Something like the 4-cost Usopp, maybe you've got a 5-cost Sanji, things like that. This could be pretty nice to increase your defense into big stuff decks. But this is probably quite poor on curve because you're not going to have many Dons left open unless you manage to get specifically the Usopp down on 5. So, not sure. Straw Hat Shanks is a nice piece for that. I don't think it's going to save the deck. I think Shanks has a lot of problems right now. I miss him. I miss him. Do you miss Shanks? Leave a comment. Leave a like. Leave a like for Shanks. But yeah, if you are playing Straw Hat Shanks, this is a nice option to have. And finally, Red Sanji has struggled sometimes with getting rushed down himself. So if that is something you're concerned about, you could try this. You can't give it rush because it has an on-play. But it kind of has an inbuilt rush, sort of. Yeah, it's searchable. It's okay. And again, there's probably other red decks that I've not mentioned here that you could play this in. Other than, of course, the Bonney. So I think if you are a fan of random red rogue decks, this is going to be a really nice option to have. Next card, 10-cost Big Luffy. 10-12 Egghead, 4 Emperor's Straw Hat Crew. Unfortunately, not Supernovas. Pour one out for the yellow kid mains. If you have 1 or less life cards, give this card in your hand at -1 cost. It means you can play it on 9, which is quite nice. We've got a pretty decent looking odd curve going here with Bonney. Nothing particularly for 5, unless I'm forgetting something. But then on 7, you can drop this Zoro, or you can drop the Kuma. And then on 9, you can drop the Luffy if you are on 1 life. Which, when we go over the strategy, it will make more sense. But I think that is the plan, is just to be at 1 life immediately. And then on play, you trash 1 card from your hand. Your leader gains 2k until the end of your opponent's next turn. And then he becomes a blocker until the end of your opponent's next turn. I actually think this is potentially a little bit underpowered. Like, on the turn it comes down, you're getting great value. You go to 9 in the Bonney deck. And then you've got a big blocker who basically gets out of any hit for free. We've seen how powerful the 12k blockers are with, like, the Whitebeard deck, right? Or the Ace deck, sorry. It plays Whitebeard. The fact you have to trash a card, and the fact it only gains blocker for the turn, I don't know, I feel like it didn't need both of those. I don't know, let me know, maybe I'm being greedy. I feel like this could have stayed as a blocker, or not trashed a card. Power creep's crazy, man, what am I saying? It's a crazy thing. But yeah, this seems very good. I don't think this is broken, but this is going to make your late game very well defensible in Red Yellow Bonney. However, this card is going to be extremely weak to Red Rock because you've gone -1 you've gone -2 in fact in hand size, and then if you don't get the block, then yeah, you're just buffing your leader by 2, which is okay. But we've seen this kind of effect before, and I'm not sure that's enough if this does get removed. So into Red Rock decks, that could be pretty tough. But in the West, we're not going to have Red Rock very long. Anyway, what other decks could we play this in? Well, you could play this in Vegapunk. Could be pretty decent in Vegapunk. However, you'll compete with 9-cost Bonney, and Vegapunk tends to be more aggressive than defensive. Maybe this could revive like the top end heavy Vegapunk builds that we saw in the past. But broadly, I think this is probably just going to be outclassed by Bonney. But there is the nice interaction where, because he only costs 9, you can still use your lead effect, which is pretty cool. Blue Yellow Nami I'm quite excited about, because we've now sort of got a critical mass of Straw Hat stuff that you can do. You can play like Young Girl on 2, who is not Straw Hat, but she's very good. Then on 4, maybe you can play the 4-cost Sanji, and the 5-cost Nami, you've got the 7-cost Robin, and then you've got this 10-cost Luffy on curve, which could be pretty cool. You're not going to really want to be at 1 life with Nami. That's not how the deck works, really. But even just playing for this for 10s, as long as you've got a Young Girl on the board to give your leader that Don, you're going to be able to become 9k in your opponent's turn, which... I mean, that's the same thing Bonney's doing, except this deck gets to draw a shitload of cards and doesn't have to die to do so. You get to actually keep your life at like a decent level. So that's quite interesting. However, again, you are competing with Big Whitebeard in this deck, and he does a lot for Nami. Gives you more cards, gives you 4 Don. So if you don't have Young Girl, you've got the Don in your leader, and you just get to swing with a bunch of stuff for bigger. And he's always a blocker, whereas this Luffy does lose blocker. So, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see if this is better than Whitebeard in Nami. I mean, going to 9k for 1 card is crazy, but you lose a lot of, like, card efficiency compared to Whitebeard. But you draw some back, so, I don't know, I think this is quite interesting for Nami at the very least. Egghead Luffy is another interesting top end. If you do want to play, like, a max defense build, where you go fully in on, like, the 6-cost Kuma, 7-cost Robin, then this 10-cost Luffy. You've also got access to the 5-cost Borsalino for healing now. So I could see this deck just being like, sort of like New Age and Nell, where instead of setting at 1 to 2, you just heal forever and get insane defense out of this guy, which could be pretty interesting. And finally, Enel himself could even play this. I'm not sure this is going to solve Enel's problems. Enel's problems, at least from where I'm sitting, are primarily emu related. Like, you sit at 1 and they throw like 70,000 sevens at you, and this doesn't really help with that. Like, you only need to trash 1k to get to the 7s, but you still need to trash cards, and I don't know, that's going to shorten your lifespan a lot with an L still. By the way, this NL art is fire. I really hope we get these in the West. These like eye-popping alts are so good, man. I really hope we get these. But yeah, I think it's probably be decent in an L, but I don't think it's going to save an L. So what is the Bonney strategy? This is what I can sort of gather from what they've released. I think you're going to want to take aggressively to 1, become a 9k leader on defense, and then heal back to 1 when necessary. For power boost, you've got the Zoro and the Luffy that we've just talked about. For healing, you've got things like 6-cost Kuma, 7-cost Kuma, and also the 5-cost Borsalino. And in this way, because you're 9k on defense very early, you're just completely uninteractable for aggro decks. Imagine like a Jinbei deck. Jinbei loves going 5-5-5. Well, if you're at 9k, that's just shit. Jinbei has enough difficulties dealing with like Ace at 6k. Bonney at 9k is going to be diabolical. And her power down effect on the activate main could be quite nice for sort of battling for board, or even comboing with some mid-range removal effects, such as 7-cost Ben Beckman could be quite good in this deck, to sort of combat mid-range decks. And then in the late game, you've got Burst with 9-cost Bonney to just burn their opponent's last life and be a big rush guy, or even Red Roger if you like. What issues can I foresee? Well, Pudding. This deck seems designed around just taking down to 1 nearly immediately, so I think you're going to have quite a big hand and thus be quite weak to Pudding, at least in the early game. And especially if you're making it such that your opponent can't really attack you, Pudding has even less downside, so I do think that's going to be potentially a problem. Removal, you do have KO protection in the Egghead Nami from the Egghead starter deck, but that's only for Egghead cards, and only KO. So, like, blue removal, for example, like Red Rock, could be quite problematic, although it is worth noting that in the West, Red Rock will be rotating around the time this deck comes out. We don't know exactly the dates, I believe, for rotation yet, but it's April, and this release is in April, so could even be the same day, who knows. I think other big stuff decks could just be better And when they're just swinging 12, 12, 12, being 9k is not as good as when you're battling against aggro decks. This deck doesn't seem to have much interaction with the opponent's board. It's mostly just built around, I'm big, look at me. So maybe decks like Roger or even Red Blue Ace could potentially be a problem for this deck. We'll just have to see. Your board will become vulnerable when you're at 9k. If you've got smaller units, they're just going to attack those. So you're going to need to stack annoying on-KOs. 7-cost Kuma's great for that because it burns when it goes down. 4-cost Hawkins, maybe, Kikunojo, El Clasicos. But you've got to be careful with what you're putting in your deck and making sure that your opponent can't just focus board instead. Because you do obviously need characters to win the game. Typically. And also life burn effects. I think if you're sitting at 1 and they go like, okay, 8-cost Kid. You're like, oh, I'm at 0. Can I afford to go to 9k? Do I need to heal? And on those turns where you need to heal, you're only going to be at 7k. Only 7k, I know, right? But that is when decks can capitalize on your vulnerability on those turns where you choose to heal. So I think potentially life burn could be bad for this deck. Again, it's removing card advantage, right? And this deck is going to gain all of its card advantage just from being big, right? The opponent wants to swing 7, you go, nah, I'm at 9, haha. I just bought a card, I just bought 2 cards effectively. You don't have a lot of draw in this deck, though you do have some good healing options for free with like the Kuma and the Borsalino. Overall, I can see this being an absolute like aggro stomper, like Jinbei, Rayleigh, potentially even Emu. And spoiler alert, if you're not caught up, I suppose, but that's kind of what goes on in Egghead, right? You got Bonney and the boys fighting against the elders. So I guess that the fact that I think she should be pretty good into Emu is quite cool. And the reason I say that is because obviously if you're at 9k, I mean they're swinging 777. Nice swings, bro. I do wonder if she can get through without unblockable, but Roger can maybe help there. Either way, I can see this being really good into aggro, having a bit more difficulty into slower decks potentially. Now we've got one more bonus card today, is a Koby. Bro needs some new pants. Get this guy some new pants. Surely the Navy can afford it. And his shirt, look at that. Anyway, 671k, Navy Sword. Once per turn, if your leader has the Navy type, and this character will be removed from the field, you can trash 1 card from your hand instead. Cool interaction, actually, when you summon this with the Helmeppo. Helmeppo tries to bottom deck its target at the end of the turn. Well, Koby can deny that if you trash 1 card, which is pretty cool. So this is a way to develop 2 6/7s on your 6th on turn. And both of these obviously will gain character rush from Koby's leader effect. Then on your turn, once per turn, one of your opponent's characters is KO'd. Draw a card. So this works by effect and this works by battle. And if you're familiar with the Koby deck, it's a deck that's based all around battling for board control, with these effects that let you attack active characters, let you attack characters immediately, things like that. So this Koby is just going to give you more hand advantage, which in the past Koby did suffer with. There's a couple of other cards that I think combo quite nicely with this as well. 4-cost Kujaku gives you a bit of cycle and then gives your 6-cost or less sword characters extra 2000 power. That's going to make this Koby and this Helmeppo both 9k. So that's really hard to battle. And obviously Koby's leader effect stops effect-based removal like Jozu or Red Rock, which is pretty cool. And also the 4-cost Koby is a pretty cool curve I'm envisioning, where you go 4 Don, okay, I'm going to play this Koby, and if your opponent has played a Searcher, which, imagine the gall to play a Searcher in the face of a Koby deck, but you can go Helmeppo Koby, develop these 2 guys on 6, attack with your 4-cost Koby, KO that Searcher with his when attacking, then you're going to draw 1 from this Koby, and then you're going to draw 1 from this Koby, so you're going to draw 2. That seems pretty cool. Is this going to make Koby that much better? I don't know. That's hard to say, but it's going to make his board wider, faster, and give him more card draws. This just seems good in every way. I can foresee this being your ideal Helmeppo target off your first Helmeppo pretty much every time, just to develop these 2 guys and get the draw engine rolling. If you know me, you know I really enjoyed this deck when it came out, but it has not felt great in a while. We're still waiting on those EB03 cards in the West. Man, I'm really excited to play with those cards, but here's another one that I can just wait and hope for until April. I think this Koby card will make the deck better. I'm not convinced it will make him meta. There's a rhyme there. But I think it's promising nonetheless. So that's it, just a short video, thoughts on the new Bonney cards and Koby for fun. I think Bonney looks decent. I think she definitely has weaknesses in terms of... Pudding really does scare me, because if you're not going to 1 immediately, you're losing so much value, right? You're losing so much value. But if you do go to 1 and you get Pudding, you're going to lose like 4 or 5 cards. Which feels not great. But being 9k in your opponent's turn, I mean, that's just strong, right? That's just really strong. We've seen how good that is for Roger. And you can definitely compare this deck to Roger. But the fact she has another leader effect, rather than like 2 downsides. She effectively has 1 downside, because she's only a 5k until you take a bunch of lives. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. If you're a big believer in this deck, let me know in the comments. I'm actually more of just a believer in this Zoro card. I think the Zoro card's cracked. I'm really excited to try this in a bunch of different decks. The Luffy seems alright, but I'm really hyped for this Zoro. 7 cost Whitebeard? What a time to be alive. Either way, thank you for watching. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day.